Thank you so much for everyone joining us here today and joining us for this conversation. My name is Marjorie Chan. I'm the Artistic Director of Theatre Passe Muraille. Today I have maroon hair. I think it's maroon. My glasses are white glasses. I'm wearing a blue dress and a pink necklace. I'm in my messy living room, and as is for everyone else, I'm sure, it's messy outside the guidelines of my Zoom window. Otherwise, it looks okay. I do want to welcome, this is a really special moment for us to kind of prepare to start to welcoming back people. We're going to be having performances in our theater starting in January. So this is just a conversation we just wanted to open up and be able to have with our community, frankly. Before we start, I do want to acknowledge the original caretakers of our land, from the land that I'm currently on, and as well as I think all of our guests are from, or at least the institution that they're from Toronto, Treaty 13 territory. Original caretakers, I express gratitude for the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat, and the Chippewa, and the Anishinaabe, as well as the original caretakers, the current caretakers, the Mississaugas of the Credit. I do consider one, certainly we are also part of an area that is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Agreement. And in that spirit of, I think, sharing resources and being collaborative is also kind of why we want to share this space here today. All that to say, we have lovely, lovely guests from Women's College Hospital, which I'm so excited. We do these Zooms and we talk with actors, we talk with directors, but actually here we have some wonderful guests from Women's College Hospital, which I think is so fantastic. So I do want to introduce them. I want to introduce Janelle Noel, who does the myriad of titles, but one of myriad of titles at the Women's College Hospital. I thought, really? Did you do all of that? And she's like, yeah, for sure. As well as I want to welcome our two medical experts as well, Dr. Harjot Atwal, as well as Dr. Alia Dharamsi. So thank you so much for this. As I said, as a theater, we're going to be starting to invite people back in. And then for us, we had to really think about, what that meant. For us, for anyone who's interested, we do have our COVID protocols online, and maybe I can paste them there. There they are. So people can look at those, and also if they have questions about that, they can email us at the theater about those. So I want us to just maybe start us off that we have a policy in place. It is according to public health that to enter the premises, to be a part of premises as artist or contractor or audience, that you have to be fully vaccinated. How safe right now should people feel, being in a space that has that policy in place?
Sure, I can start. So both Dr. Dharamsi and I both work together a ton, so we'll probably just be jumping in and out of each other's thoughts. But I think, as we've heard a lot, the vaccine mandates were introduced about a couple months ago now, and that we knew that even from a year ago when everything was starting to shut down, and how would we were in and out of first and second waves, how do we get out of this? And we always knew the vaccines were the answer to that. Testing is super important. Testing helps recognize this, it drives public safety, it helps us identify cases, and it prevents the spread. But ultimately, the definitive way to do that is through vaccines. So by having the vaccine mandate, ensuring that people have done as much as they can before entering places, reuniting with loved ones, it's the most we can do at this point to get back to a sense of normal. Nothing ever that we do in life is risk-free, right? You cross the road, that's an inherent risk in and of itself. But this is, at this point, by getting the vaccine mandates, things are back to as safe as possible as we can be.
Thank you. That's so helpful. I guess there's so many questions within that for me that I think also that I had, frankly, maybe we can just step back even a little bit, but maybe I maybe it's helpful even just to know like what is a vaccine? Like, what does that actually mean? How does it even work? Like, I think just hearing that, kind of laid out is it would be helpful too as well.
I'm really happy to chat about that because it's one of the things that I think is part of the coolest part about learning about COVID is understanding vaccines. I wonder if you'd allow me to share my screen, because I actually have some pictures that I think would help. If you just give me one moment, because I learn with pictures. I don't know about everyone else, but I need to see it to believe it. That's the way my brain works. Just give me 2 moments. So let's see, I can share some pictures. It's just opening. So one of the things that I think we can chat about as I pull up the pictures is to understand, first and foremost, that the vaccine does not contain the whole coronavirus, and it doesn't cause coronavirus. And when we think about vaccines, we have to think about the fact that our body needs to be ready to recognize coronavirus if it ever sees it. If it becomes infected with a coronavirus, we need to be able to prep and prime our body to make antibodies very quickly. If you've never seen coronavirus before, like your body's never experienced it, it takes time to make antibodies. It takes a few days, and that's why you don't feel well. That's why you get the fever, the headache, because it's taking time for your bodies to ramp up their immune system and attack the coronavirus. But the way vaccines work is we give you a vaccine that contains some part of the coronavirus, in this case, just the outside. And it's able to prime your body to make antibodies so that you have antibodies ready. So it takes much less time to mount a very good immune system, an immune response, if you've already been primed. So let me show you this. So what you see here is the coronavirus virus and what it looks like. And the reason why it's called coronavirus is because when scientists first looked at it underneath a microscope, they said it looks like this ball is wearing a crown, and the Latin for crown is corona. So how the vaccines work is the scientists got 3D images of just the protein on the outside, which is called the spike protein. And it looks like this if you 3D render it. And how the scientists made antibodies is what they did is they took just the spike protein and they put the spike protein mRNA just for that one little protein on the outside, and they suspended it into a nanoparticle. It's basically a little fat bubble. And that's what the vaccine is. It doesn't contain the whole virus. It just contains the mRNA, which is like our DNA. It's our recipe to do everything we need in our body, to make all of our hair, to make saliva, to sweat when we're hot. Everything we do is because of your DNA. And we just put the mRNA for the spike protein in. We take that and we inject it in the vaccine. And then you make spike proteins. And when your body sees the spike proteins, it says, hold on a second, that's not from myself, that's foreign. And so it makes antibodies. And the next time your body sees the coronavirus, instead of it binding to your cells in these receptors and coming into your cells and causing infection and causing death and disease, your antibodies neutralize it. And when we give you a vaccine, it's actually also really important to know that the vaccine only stays in your body for 24 hours. It doesn't stay for longer than that. You feel unwell for 24 hours because that's how long it takes for your body to make antibodies and neutralize all of the vaccine. And then the vaccine is gone. And the only thing that stays behind are these really cute little antibodies that we need. And we're really grateful to have.
Are they cute?
I think they're cute. I think they're darling. I am very grateful for mine. I love my antibodies.
Thank you for that. It takes me to, we had some questions that were submitted earlier. And so it takes me to some of those questions. That one of the questions, there's a series of questions, and one of them says, if the vaccines seem to be wearing out, how much safer are vaccinated than unvaccinated people to be with? And so can you even just talk about that portion of it? As I understand it from how you explained it, can the vaccine wear out even since it doesn't stay in your body?
Great question. Harjot, you can always jump in. You know that though. So one of the things that is important to understand is we're still developing an understanding of antibody levels and what they mean. So right now it's possible to get an antibody level, and you can know your number is 5 or 50 or 500, but we don't know what that really means in the context of fighting infection. When you get your first dose of the vaccine, you get a spike in the antibodies, and then the antibodies go down. And you take the second shot, and then your antibodies go down again. Because coronavirus rates are still high in the city, your risk of getting coronavirus is still relatively high. It's not gone. And so to protect our most vulnerable, to protect our elderly, in Canada, the Health Canada and government officials have decided that they were going to boost the immunity of those who are the most at risk. We don't know if it's how much antibody is enough. We also don't know how long the antibodies last for. We have some evidence now to say that you have a very good lasting immunity, and that you do have antibodies 6 months, 1 year, 18 months down the line. But as we know, we're still developing research. There's a really good question in the chat that asks, is being infected with coronavirus giving you the same immunity as the vaccine? So you're right, you do get immunity when you fight the infection, and that's very good immunity. One thing that we believe in, though, is you still need to be boosted. You should still get the vaccine, because like I said, your natural immunity goes down. And this way we know that you have a good level of immunity as we go into the winter season, when coronavirus's rates are probably going to go up.
And the other thing I would like to point out too is that this idea of waning immunity or immunity knocking off isn't exclusive to coronaviruses. So the common example I always tell people is about tetanus. So tetanus is super well studied. We've been giving these vaccines for decades, and we now have really good evidence that we know that the vaccine holds good for about 10 years. At about the 10-year mark, it's not that all of a sudden your immunity drops down to 0. It's just that you're no longer protected at the level where if you're exposed to it, it would prevent you from getting the disease. So you get a booster every 10 years just to top you back up so you're protected from it again.
Great, thank you so much. I guess a different person had also asked a question. What is the optimum amount of time to allow between shots? So in terms of that range, like, I think, are we learning enough about that? What do we know?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we probably heard, and especially in Canada, because initially when both vaccines came out with the mRNA vaccines with Pfizer and Moderna, they were initially scheduled as a 2-dose series, for Pfizer 21 days apart, and with Moderna to be 28 days apart. And then there was a supply shortage, and we actually extended out, and Canada was one of the few countries to do this, where we extended out everyone. It was about initially 35 days, then up to about 116 days, so about 12 weeks from first and second shots. Of course, this for most people, this got bumped up. So most people got their boosters and at about the 8-ish week mark after their first dose. What we actually found, and because all of the science, just like Dr. Dharamsi was saying, is constantly evolving, we found that people who had a longer period of time between their first and second dose, so they found the evidence to be the best at actually 8 to 12 weeks post their first dose, you have the strongest level of immunity. And when they're comparing all these groups, who whether they had it 21 days apart, 6 weeks apart, 8 weeks, or 12 weeks, the 8 to 12 week groups actually had a higher level of antibodies at the 12 or at the 1 year mark post their vaccine series. But again, although they had a higher antibody level, we don't necessarily know if this equates to that higher level of protection. Based off of most immunity studies, we assume so. So it is actually, we're thinking that down the line, once we're post this pandemic time, it may be that if we still need COVID boosters, that it might be at a lengthened series between. But as of right now, the current Health Canada and public health policy is to still get them at a minimal interval. So the safest effective dose is between the 21 or 28 days, but you realistically can get at any point staggered between that. There's been no change in the evidence right now that recommends a different interval. Alia, I don't know if you have anything else to add to that.
No, I totally agree, 100%.
Right, so at this moment, there's no real evidence that shows that there's any real difference on impact. Super interesting, because I think I was understanding it as you were explaining. This is how we think about comedy. This is a little insider about comedy, is that when you're if you're getting laughter, at the peak of your laughter is when you put the next joke in, so that rides on the laughter. So that's that's how good my brain translates that metaphor of what you described.
No, it's a good comparison.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, I'm just going to go back to there was a series of questions, and one of them kind of is like asked that the medium that carries a vaccine is composed of products that we try to avoid. And the follow-up is kind of like, how safe are they? I think that's the question. If they're trying to avoid the products in which the vaccine is carried into the bodies, then how safe are the vaccines for that person?
So I think that's a very, very good question, because we, Dr. Atwal and I and Janelle, all believe that you need to understand what's going in your body. So the amount of vaccine you actually get is 0.3 mils. So it's 1/3 of a mil. So it's a very small dose. And the things that are in there, the chemicals, the components of the vaccine that are in there are really important to ensure that the vaccine is stable. So this vaccine is one of the most fragile vaccines. Like I mentioned, there are little bubbles of fat, they're nanoparticles, so they're impossible to see with the naked eye and even difficult with a microscope. So we need to be able to transport it from where it's being made in vials across countries, across oceans, deliver to each site, draw it up and be able to inject it. So there's always a risk and benefit. So yes, we want to avoid chemicals. We want to keep our bodies safe and clear and clean, but we also need a vaccine that works. If we didn't put those things into the vaccine, you wouldn't have any guarantee that you're actually getting active and working vaccine into your body. So having a small amount and having the importance of knowing that you're getting a true working vaccine are both really important.
Yeah, and that's a really good way to frame it. And the other thing that sometimes I help give people reassurance is that a lot of the components in there, people don't know them by their generic names, rightfully so. I never had heard about half of these things before these vaccines came out, and you have to look into it. But the ingredients within the vaccines are things that are commonly found in products that we use day to day. So things like chapstick, dish soap, in liquid gel caps. If you've ever taken a Tylenol, an Advil, and the gel coating, they're the same stabilizers in a lot of products that we use in our day-to-day lives. And again, it's in an extremely small dose, just like Dr. Dharamsi was saying.
Great. I think there's a question in the chat, and the question in the chat is, will it be a yearly vaccine or undecided yet? Oh, I see it got answered. But just
I was just going to type an answer, but we can actually say it out loud too.
Yeah.
So we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen if it's going to be yearly. We get a yearly flu vaccine because the flu is very tricky. It evades the natural immunity. It evades your antibodies. Every year, a different kind of flu comes out that's just different enough that your antibodies from the last flu shot won't cover it. So whether or not we'll get a COVID variant or we'll get COVID variants that will require you to have a booster will really depend on worldwide COVID rates. The more COVID rates there are, the more copies of the virus is making in people's body, and the more likely it is the copies will have a mistake, and the mistake will make it more likely to be spread or more likely to make people sick. So the best way to prevent us from needing a booster is to prevent variants. And the best way to prevent variants is to have low COVID rates. So that's wearing masks, washing your hands, and getting vaccinated so that we can know that our vaccine is good enough.
It also in the chat that someone actually, their hospital reached out to them that we are looking at third doses in this city, it seems like, or at least certainly someone has been reached out in that respect, so that we might be getting third doses as well.
We are giving third doses to individuals who are immunocompromised. So they may have had stem cell transplants, organ transplants. They're under active chemotherapy, elderly individuals, and people that for any other reason have a weakened immune system, because right now their risk of COVID is quite high given the rates that we have.
Great. I just want to I'm going to bring Janelle back on because Janelle went to a hockey game. Janelle is a hockey fan. I'm actually a hockey fan. I don't know if anyone knew that. But Janelle went to a hockey game and there was a question: how safe should I feel going into crowd events where everyone is vaccinated? And what about when the vaccine restrictions are lifted? And so I wanted to place that back. You were at Scotiabank Arena. What does that mean? What's the risk in that kind of environment, in a crowd environment where there is a vaccine mandate to enter that environment?
Well, go for it, Alia. Because I'm on the side, I'm on a different side of the fence, right? I'm on the side that I want this to be done with. I want to pick up my life and get back to where things were, right? I mean, so so on my end, I'm gonna say that we just have to be vaccinated. It just I can't answer that question, but Alia can, Dr. Dharamsi or Dr. Atwal can, because this is where I'm just like a patron and I just want things to get better, and so they can answer for me too.
No, but Janelle, your perspective is important. As like someone who's getting back to regular life, who's now vaccinated, everyone around you is vaccinated, but there's tons of people. And compared to the last year, especially in Toronto, where you're not allowed to see more than 2 people 6 feet apart, did it feel safe? Were you
no, and that's what I was saying. So I went back before it was fully opened, right? So it was there's still like a row, and then people, then a row, and right. So I felt safe, but I felt weird because I was like, where is everybody, right? Right. So then, I mean, for the benefits of me, like I told you, I got to get front row seats, even though that's what I paid for, right? Because the seats weren't marked, right? But I mean, I did feel safe, and I felt safe, and I felt safe even during when we were doing the vaccination clinics. Like we were seeing 3,000 people a day or plus, and they weren't vaccinated, right? They were getting vaccinated, right? So even on that level of getting vaccinated, you felt really powerful because we were going to get to a place where things were going to be better, right? And you were going to so right. So then that safety. So then going into this place now, you feel amazing. I feel amazing. I feel like I can pull my mask down and not be worried, and not leave it to the person to be dishonest to me, right? Because some people will, they lie about that right now, right? But I mean, when they're going into this and we're all on the same page, everyone's honest, everyone's vaccinated, and you can feel safe in those environments, right? So that's how I felt, right? But I mean, like I said, there's still people that we're in the hospital and we're all vaccinated, and you can still go with another staff member in the elevator and they're still step back, they're still scared, right? And they are vaccinated, right? So I mean, it's all the perception of how the impact of this pandemic on you, I think, right? In terms of how you've worked through it and how you feel about it. But I think that the more that we're talking about that everyone's vaccinated, that will lift that angst or that anxiety. And the other part to it, I feel like, and me and Dr. Dharamsi have spoken about this too, and Dr. Atwal, like it was the words, right? So you get vaccinated. It was very aggressive, right? Like, because all of us to this point were immunized. And I think the softer part of it is that it was the wording. So I think a little bit of the hesitancy, so you feel like you're vaccinated. Like it's weird. And if we kind of tone down the language a little bit, we're all immunized from so many different things. I just got my 10-year booster. I'm committed to making sure that I can do all the things in my own life so that that I can do that. So I do think that it was that as we get better and people, our numbers go up, people will feel better in these spaces. But I didn't feel worried. I felt actually amazing that we were honest and everybody in there was vaccinated, and we could have, I felt good about that.
Thank you. I hope one day I'll go to a hockey game again. Cynthia Spring has some questions there in the chat. Cynthia, you're welcome to come online if you want to ask these questions, or I can read these questions aloud. I think she's okay. I'm going to read these questions. Great. So maybe just to address the first thing, kind of talking about being in spaces where people are vaccinated or not vaccinated. Cynthia's question is there a risk of having one person vaccinated while their partner is not? Who is more at risk in that scenario? And will the unvaccinated person be more at risk if their partner is vaccinated?
Good question.
No, so this is a really good question. So I think a lot of this comes back to that risk isn't binary. So it's not that you have no risk or all the risk, but it's stratifying where is your level of risk in each scenario. So for instance, like if you're going to a hockey game where it's still socially distanced and everyone has it's a requirement to be immunized, that's relatively safer than going to a party with 200 people where you don't know their vaccine status and no one's socially distanced. So for this circumstance of if you have a partnership, one partner is vaccinated and one isn't, the partner who is vaccinated at baseline is more protected than their unvaccinated partner. In terms of the risk from each to the other, the unvaccinated person, I would still say, is at higher risk, not necessarily to their partner, but in general of getting COVID. And the vaccines are great. They 100% prevent you from dying of COVID or from ending up severely sick, intubated with a breathing tube down your throat. We know that. And we know that is the one thing that holds true at the 3-month mark, post 6 month, a year after. What does decrease over time is your risk overall of getting COVID itself. Even if you get it, you still likely will just have a mild illness, but the transmission is still something that doesn't remain clear. Getting vaccinated definitely does decrease your risk of transmitting it, but we haven't been able to yet to stick a number on that and say it's 50% less likely or 80% less likely. So in that household, both people are still at risk of getting COVID. The benefit is that the person who is vaccinated is less likely to die or end up in a hospital or pass it on to other people that they come into contact with.
Great. We got a little thumbs up from Cynthia. And as well, that's a really clear explanation of it. Cynthia also asks, is there a test we can get to see if we already have antibodies from perhaps having COVID without really knowing it? I think early on, people, were identifying during the first lockdown, kind of people got ill or got very ill and maybe had it. And is there a test that can tell you whether you had it or not?
Yes, this is a good question. So there is an antibody test if you have received an mRNA vaccine, so either Pfizer or Moderna, or if you've ever had a natural COVID infection, the test can pick up on that. The caveat to that is we don't really have a good way to interpret these antibody tests. The antibody level doesn't tell us, are you fully, immune from getting this? We don't know how far out were you from your COVID infection to now. We don't know whether this indicates that you need a booster. We don't even know if this is whether if you had your vaccines and you had COVID, is this a double up from both of those things, or is it just from the vaccine or just from your immunization or just from your natural infection? So there are tests. The trouble is that it's not really a useful way to interpret the information it provides.
I think, and I guess that question, because I'd be curious about whether some people were ill, kind of, as I said, early on in the first lockdown, before there was tests widely available, did they actually have it at that point? And I've heard other stories of friends who are just like, we're pretty sure we had it. We were really sick, and it was, and it lasted for so long, and luckily they survived it. But I guess that's the only reason right now, just to even get that kind of test, is just actually for your own curiosity to see if you actually had it. We're just at the half-hour mark, but there's just one more question, and maybe I'll just ask one more after that.
This is a really important one.
Jennifer, you're welcome to come online, Jennifer, if you want to ask that question yourself, or I can ask it aloud. It's up to you. Great. Thank you, Jennifer, for joining us. So I'll read your question. I don't know if this was asked earlier, but if there's risk to women's health or side effects from the vaccine. I've heard stories of women having difficulty with fertility, pregnancy, menstruation, and menopause. Can you speak to that in terms of the side effects of the vaccines?
Absolutely. So I am, I think we had mentioned before, I'm a family doctor by background. I also actually do work in fertility. So I do low intervention options to help women get pregnant. So in my practice, I get asked this on a daily basis. So there is really good evidence right now that the COVID vaccines do not impact your ability to get pregnant, to have a safe and healthy pregnancy that you carry to term, or to have postpartum repercussions or consequences to mom or baby. The reason we know this is back from the initial trials, they were actively not recruiting women who were pregnant. Pregnant women are always in a group that gets pushed to the side because we never know if it's safe to test things on them. So they're always a group that gets tested much after the rest of the population. That being said, from the initial population that they were giving the vaccines to, there was a handful of women who did happen to get pregnant in between their doses. So they did follow those women. And this was back in the first stages of the trial. So before we were testing on kids or anyone else. Those women were followed they're still being followed now. So it's 18 months post their vaccine administration. These women had healthy pregnancies. They delivered at term, and then both moms and babies are still healthy. The other really good thing is that since then, we have had cohort testing specifically on pregnant women. So the vaccine was administered to women who were already pregnant. So they were at least over 12 weeks pregnant at the time of vaccine administration, and they were also followed. So all of those moms have since delivered as well. And same thing. So those moms had healthy pregnancies, healthy deliveries. There's a common misconception that vaccines can delay fertility or they can impact your ability to get pregnant. But this all comes down to that in the first 12 weeks of your pregnancy is the time that things are most likely to go wrong, if they're going to go wrong. And that's usually just due to genetic or chromosomal abnormalities. So in those circumstances, there's nothing that you can or cannot do to save that pregnancy. It's tough to hear, but a lot of times the number one thing I hear is that women will say, I went skating that day, I ate tacos that day, and then I had my miscarriage the next day. And it's the fact that it's human nature. You want to associate the fact that you've had this devastating loss to something that you had control over. But we know that the vaccines are safe all throughout the fertility journey, whether you're trying to conceive, you're pregnant, or you're postpartum. And we also know that they're safe for kids. They've already been approved for 12 plus, and you've already probably been hearing that we're just waiting that the CDC has already approved it for kids, and Health Canada's in the works right now of approving it to 5 to 11-year-olds. And the next group is actually 6 months to 5 years after that. So I actively encourage all of my fertility patients to get their vaccine at any point when they're trying to get pregnant.
Harjot, right? And don't the babies get the antibodies too when the mom gets it? Right?
Yeah, absolutely. The babies get antibodies. And if mom is breastfeeding too, those antibodies continue to get passed on to baby, providing protection, which is really important because babies don't make their own antibodies until 3 to 6 months of life. So for those first 3 months, you are all they have. So it's huge. You're doing everything you can for them.
Thank you so much. There was a question about additional resources, and Dr. Dharamsi has put that resource in the chat, so that's available to you. There was another comment.
Yeah, sorry, I'm sorry to really quickly cut you off. Another really good one is if anyone is on Instagram, the Pandemic Pregnancy Guide was actually created by a group of obstetricians at St. Mike's Hospital. And so they provide very evidence-based information, again, about all things related to pregnancy and vaccines and other neat stuff now as well, but a lot of it relating specifically to the pandemic.
Great, I love that it's on Insta.
Yeah.
There's the comment, obviously from one of our participants who's obviously hesitant as people. We know we've had severe reactions from increased arthritis to trouble breathing, and I'm gathering that's like reactions to other vaccines. And so, you know, what do we say? You know, what is possible? Can people have reactions to the vaccine?
This is like really good question. So one of the things that we like to educate patients about is correlation and causation, or are two things related or not related? So anyone who has rheumatoid arthritis, immunologic conditions knows that if they got a fever, if they got really sick, their condition will likely temporarily worsen. So it goes without saying that if you got a vaccine and you developed a fever, that you may have your condition may worsen slightly and then get better again. Now we want to compare that to if you actually had COVID and you were sick for 2 weeks versus being slightly under the weather for 1 day because you got a vaccine. That would be a much bigger consequence on your system and on your illness, because the longer term recovery from being sick for 2 weeks for people with rheumatologic conditions or other reasons why they have illnesses is much longer. The other thing to realize is that sometimes things happen at the same time or near each other, but they're not related. One of my favorite examples is if I got my COVID vaccine and the next day a bird pooped on my head, it's not because I got the COVID vaccine. It just happened to happen near each other. And it sounds like a bit of a silly example, but I think it illustrates that not everything is because of something. One more personal example is my grandmother got her COVID vaccine and then died 3 weeks later. She didn't die because she got the COVID vaccine. She died because she was very, very ill. And the COVID vaccine was one way we were trying to help her, but they weren't related. So we may hear stories of, I had the COVID vaccine and then I got a different period than usual, or I got a COVID vaccine and my hair turned gray, or I got a COVID vaccine and then I had diverticulitis, or my gallbladder got infected. Just because they happen near each other doesn't mean they're related. And for all those examples, there is no evidence to say that those things are related. but people may see that they happened around the same time. So if you're really worried about your condition, if you're worried about your underlying medical condition and the effects of vaccination, you should talk to the doctors, talk to your doctor. And most likely 99 times out of 10, they'll say it's better to be vaccinated, especially if you're immunocompromised, especially if you have underlying medical conditions.
You know, my thing is, right? And this is what, and I know there's so much conversation, I could stay on here forever, right? But it's like, we have these physicians that say, you know what, it's important to take this vaccine. Like, it's really, really important. And then the same physicians that are encouraging you to take the vaccine, when you don't take it, you end up in the hospital, are the same physicians you're expecting to save you. It's the same body of people telling you to do the same thing. It's not a different, it's not a separate group of people saying take it, and it's the exact same people that will treat you and that care for you and do that, that's saying it's the best option, right? And I think that sometimes people have to realize, as like in final words to this whole thing, I'm just gonna say, like, I think that the part of this thing is that you get to a place where you have to actually self-identify, and you've got to look at your life. And based on your life, you've got to make a decision, right? And I know, so maybe at the beginning I had hesitancy and I was all weird and I didn't want to do this and I was all this stuff, you know, was so, but then you look at it and you say, you know what, I travel. I have an elderly parent. I have a kid. I want to go be back into society. I want to be doing these things. And the only thing that equals is getting the vaccine. So whether or not some things are like you're ethical in your body and you feel like this, and right, you start to look at your lifestyle and where you are in your world and where you actually want to go in your world. And it just becomes the natural and the responsible thing to do, right? And my personal experience is that I have a friend who decided that she was going to listen to her other friend who had a bad experience. And don't get me wrong, we know what everyone has had all these different things that why they, and she believed that, and she felt like that she had someone to go along with her. She had an ally. Well, she ended up getting COVID, and she's in Bridgeport right now, estimated about 6 months rehab. She stroked multiple times on the ventilator, and the friend that she decided that she was listening with never got COVID, right? And now this friend is living with this guilt that I shouldn't have sort of, right? So my thing is, make the decision for yourself. Look at your life, look at your consequences, look at your scenarios, look at your situation, and make that decision for you. And without thinking about what the next person's doing or anybody else. And it could be that the person in your own home doesn't want to do it, and that's okay too. But you just need to make decisions what works well for you, and being honest about your lifestyle and what's happening. And like Dr. Dharamsi and Dr. Atwal says, it's about checking in with your family doctor too. And some people we realize don't have family doctors, and that's why we're here today, because they don't have the places to go with this, right? So we're hoping now, at least after this, if you do have questions, you can come to us and we can try and alleviate that stress for people and just let them self-identify and decide, this is my life and this is what I have to do based on how I'm living my life. So that's my thing.
100%, 100%. And I think, sorry, Dr. Atwal, go ahead.
No, it was me.
Okay. I want to highlight something that's really important that Janelle said. You know, we're here as physicians. Dr. Atwal's a family physician. She specializes in fertility. I work in the ER. And everyone always asks, what did your family do? And as physicians, as members of this community, as people who love our city, we would never tell anyone to do something that our family wouldn't do. I told my parents to get vaccinated. They got AstraZeneca because that was the best thing they had at the time. I will vaccinate my nieces and nephews when I can. We are both of childbearing age. We are hopefully going to have families. I got vaccinated. I believe in it because I know the science. And if it helps to ask the questions, you can always come and ask us the questions, because we know that there's a huge gap between what we hear and rumors and what we read online and the truth. And I think that's really important to know.
There's a whole bunch of new doctors online. Did you meet them? Bloggers.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's a great question. Yeah, I think that's a great question. Like, especially if people don't have family doctors, where can they reach out to? Where is it that they can ask these questions? Are there resources at Women's College Hospital or larger resources where people can go? If you don't have that, if there isn't an answer now, we can collect the information, and we'll also share that information on our website or on our social media. So where should people go, especially if they don't have doctors? So many people don't have their own family doctor right now.
Yeah, there's actually a really great link. I'll put it into the chat. SickKids has a direct line that you can call and ask about vaccination for children, youth, and their families. So that's one resource for sure. And I'll put the link in there now.
I don't know the link. I gotta send it to you after, Margie, but there is a link where you can put in your address or your postal code, and it can link you to family doctors in your area. That can, right? Because that's a big thing for people. They do not have family. We notice this in the CHCs, and there's also community health centers in people's areas that they can access for different things like that too, right? So I will get that to you, but I know there's like a website you can just go on and it'll sort of populate where you live and what's happening, and we can figure that out for some people.
You can also call your
interested...
local.
Oh, sorry. Like, go ahead.
No, you go.
I was gonna say the other thing is if you're just more interested more in like the science and what's going on and what's evolving too, Women specifically holds town halls and now virtual because everything is on Zoom, but they hold virtual town halls. So they give you a topic, a speaker a couple weeks in advance. You can submit questions, you can attend online, and just kind of gives you an up-to-date, again, same thing with expert, with just evidence-based answers as to what's going on, what's new, what's changing as well. And they host them about once every month, and the information's always on the website for Women's College Hospital about when the next town hall is.
Great. Thank you so much. Just, I know we're over time, but I just want to give one more opportunity. If there's any more questions, if you want to come online or put in the chat for our experts, from our guests from Women's College Hospital. If there's any more questions, we'll give a minute.
While you're thinking about it, I put 3 links in for places you can ask questions. So the Government of Ontario, Toronto Public Health, and then SickKids.
But they're not as nice as Dr. Atwal and Dr. Dharamsi, so good luck.
They are not as nice, definitely, absolutely. I don't see any more questions. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to our guests, to Dr. Atwal, Dr. Dharamsi, Janelle Noel from Women's College Hospital. This has been so extraordinary. Thank you. Dr. Dharamsi she's on Twitter, and so you could ask your questions there probably.
She's great. Follow her Twitter. I do.
But you know what else? If you need a follow-up session after this before you guys go live and your thing, please let us know. We'd be more than happy to do this again. If this video wasn't enough for them, if you're sharing that too, we're more than happy to help get the city back to normal. Okay, we're doing it every day. Thank you very much, you guys. You guys are amazing. Thank you.
We're so excited to come to your shows and support you.
Yeah,
we have missed you.
Yeah. All our shows. Yes. Thank you so much, and we will talk to you soon. Have a good night.
You too.